Good morning. I am Shomita Sarkar, working as PGT English in Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalaya, and I am also a research scholar in Gujarat University. I welcome you all for my today's presentation for the English Literature Summit year 2022, which is a virtual conference. So let me take you to my PPT. Last year also I was part of it, and then this year also I have joined, and I am happy to be here, and I am going to present my topic under the theme of research in English language and literature studies. My topic is scope of error analysis in English, written text of ESL students. Many of us have come across such kind of phrases or idioms. To make an error is human. Pushing the same error is dumb, which is a Portuguese proverb. Only people who work make mistakes. We learn from our mistakes. Italian proverb. And the person who recognizes his major mistakes is on the road to wisdom. So when we are talking about linguistically, there is lot of difference between error and mistake. Error and mistakes are two different things to understand, a distinction which was introduced by Corder in the year 1967. He associates error with failures in competence and mistake with failures in performance. According to Gass and Selinker, mistakes are akin to slips of the tongue and therefore they are generally one-time events, whereas errors are systematic. It means the learners are able to recognize mistakes and correct it, whereas errors are not recognized as a wrong form and they keep on committing it. Defining error. According to S. Richards, an error is the use of word or speech, act, or grammatical items in such a way that it seems imperfect and significant of an incomplete learning. Hendrickson says that learners has not yet mastered or shown a well-structured competence in the target language, and that's why they are prone to make errors. Error is a deviation from accepted rules of a language made by a learner of a second language. In this case, English is the second language for us. Learners lack of knowledge of correct rules of the target language. Errors are integral part of any language learning. In fact, when we are learning any new thing, all of us make mistakes. According to Khansir Akbar, errors are an integral part of language learning, whereas James says that he judges errors with respect to grammatical correctness and acceptance. He relates errors to ignorance, inferring that error correction is the study of linguistic ignorance, the investigation of what people do not know and how they attempt to cope up with their ignorance. Whereas Zakari Anifnef, he says that if there is an error in a person's second language acquisition, it does not only mean that the person has not learned something, but it also indicates that the teaching method applied was effective or not, or it needs some kind of modification. The occurrence of errors is merely a sign of the present inadequacy of our teaching methods. According to Sarfraz, by studying the changes that take place in the error of L2 learners in the continuous learning process, the teacher can predict the likely errors that can be made by the learners and accordingly can modify the teaching method. Now, our main aim is how can we relate these factors in second language acquisition? Errors are an integral part of language learning. It also shows the incomplete learning of the grammatical rules of the target language. Grammatical errors is a tool to know how much the learner has learned and how the teacher can prepare instructional material according to the needs of the learner. The learner errors have long been interested for second and foreign language researchers. Error analysis is one of the major topics of the field of second language acquisition. Errors are not anymore taken as a bad sign of non-performance in the teaching learning process, that it should be eliminated at any cost. They are considered to become a necessary part of language learning process. Language learning is a process in which learner benefits from the mistakes because they get to know that where they are making mistake. And then after getting the feedback, they can attempt the language successfully. There are two major approaches to learners' error studies. They are the contrastive analysis and the error analysis. Contrastive analysis and error analysis have been commonly recognized as branches of applied linguistic science according to Corder 1978. Applied linguistics is a branch interdisciplinary field which identifies and investigates the day-to-day life problem of the language learners and tries to find any kind of solution for it. So we cannot deny the importance of English language. So studying, knowing and mastering of the four skills of language acquisition, that is listening, speaking, reading, writing, anybody can get an extra competitive edge. So even if it is not our mother tongue, as an international language, we should know that language. In India, it is taught generally as a second language, and in country like China, it is used as a foreign language. Second language acquisition. According to Richards and Skimmets, it refers to the term second language as L2 as a language learned after one has learned one's native language. Language acquisition is a subconscious process, not unlike the way a child learns language. Because language acquirers are not conscious, they are consciously aware of the grammatical rules. Because non-technical language acquisition is nothing but the picking up of a new language. Now, second language acquisition. Second language acquisition L2 has a major error analysis scope because the person has already learned the mother tongue, that is L2, and interference of L1 in the process of learning of L2 is very, very natural. So Hakuta, he explains that language acquisition research can be described as the search for an appropriate level of description of the learner system of rules. The very circumstance of language acquisition is L2 is different because they have already learned a mother tongue, that is the L1. Now, writing is it considered an essential part of language learning because it serves as a tool of communication and means of learning, thinking and organizing knowledge or ideas. Unfortunately, writing has also been considered as one of the most difficult tasks for L2 learners because it encompasses so many active processes. English language has many rules, so the students may be able to learn those rules. It does not seem difficult for the students to learn and to use. However, when it comes to applying the rules, they fail to write correct sentences. And I have been teaching English in secondary and senior secondary schools, and I have found it quite normal. So learners' error in the writing skills are considered vital for their learning of English. Now, what is error analysis? Unlike the contrastive analysis, which includes L1 and L2 both, James said that error analysis attempts to describe learners' interlanguage, that is, learners' version of the target language, which is independently and objectively studied in error analysis. He believed that the most distinct feature of error analysis is that the mother tongue is not supposed to be mentioned. The purpose of error analysis is the fact that what the learner knows and does not know, we have to work upon it. So, with the right sort of information or data for him, the learner, and to form new adequate concept of rules in the target language. Error analysis, as per David Crystal, is a technique for identifying, classifying and systematically interpreting the unacceptable forms produced by someone learning a foreign language. Error analysis is also described as a procedure used by both researchers and teachers, which involves the basic part is collecting samples of learners' language, identifying the errors, classifying them accordingly to their nature and evaluating the seriousness. The major models for error analysis. Corder was the person who has started the major studies on error analysis. He has worked out on the procedure of error analysis along with so many other scientists, that is Ellis, Glass and Selinker. Thus, the model for error analysis consists of three basic things. One is data collection, the selection of corpus of language written or oral, identification of errors, error classification and quantification, the description, a grammatical analysis of each error and source, and explanation. The ultimate object of error analysis is explanation. Now, classification of errors. Classification of errors can be done as per Busman and Hadumon as per Routledge Dictionary of Languages into 5 forms. They can be the modality, the level of proficiency in LSRW skills, linguistic levels, the form, omission, insertion, substitution, types, systematic errors, errors in competence, and the cause, That is, it can be interference or interlanguage. Language transfer. These are some of the major causes of errors. One is language transfer. Language transfer means the replication of the rules from our first language to second language. For example, in Hindi, if we say मैं जा रही हूं, मैं जा रही हूं, and learners try to use the same thing for English. So they say I go. They don't use the thing I am going, but they use I go. Similarly, मेरी पतंग दे दो, मेरी पतंग दे दो, my kite give. They cannot say that please give me my kite. Next, overgeneralization is a young child may say foots instead of feet. This is the young child that is generalizing of some of the morphological rules for making the plural forms. For example, when they get to know that ed is used for the past tense form, so for come, instead of using came, they use comed, and for go, instead of using went, they use goed. Simplification. Learners often choose simple forms and construction instead of the complex ones. For example, omission of silent letters. No instead of KNOW, doubt, DOUBT, etc. Developmental errors are the children commonly errors that the children commit when first learning the language. My father did not want to study. My father did not wanted to study. So instead of want, the child uses wanted. Fossilization. Fossilization is very common among the English language teachers also. For a long time, if errors are not corrected, it becomes difficult to correct them. The correct pronunciation of the word B-O-W-L is bowl, but I have heard many people saying it even today as bowl. So that becomes a fossilization. Maybe nobody has corrected them, that's why it continues like that. Lack of knowledge of the rules and errors of avoidance. Not using the passive forms. Generally, most people do not use the passive forms. They use the present tense forms only. Overproduction. Repeating a particular structure. It was happened last night. So, it happened. Instead of using it happened last night, because they know that was is a past form they use, it was happened last night. Induced errors are transfer of training. Some errors are caused by the misleading teaching examples. An analysis of error in L2 learning is significant in three major ways. To the teacher, if a teacher initiates a very complex form of permanent analysis of whether the learners progress in the studies, they can acknowledge both the advances and the defeat of the teaching program. Error analysis can thus provide a strong support to a remedial teaching. And in Navodaya Vidyalaya, remedial teaching has a very strong hold. For a researcher, error analysis provides a researcher with the information about the process of language learning and acquisition and the methods of strategies the students use in his way to learn a language. And for the learners, making of error serves a device for the learners to use how to use the language, because they will learn from the mistakes and errors they commit. If students understand what is hard to learn, they will pay attention to the grammatical phonemes, the structures, or whatever is applicable. The scope of error analysis. Error analysis is closely related to the study of error treatment in language teaching. Today, the study of errors is particularly relevant to focus on the form of teaching methodology. There are many studies on error analysis based on learners' written work. Such studies demonstrate how error analysis could be used to improve the writing skill. Using some of the principles, concepts, and procedures offered by linguistics, error analysis is generally identified as a method of defining, classifying, and systematically interpreting the inappropriate forms generated by someone studying a foreign language or a second language, as per David Crystal. Now, scope of error analysis. The occurrence of errors is merely sign of the present inadequacy of our teaching methods, as per Corder. According to Corder, error analysis has three major aspects. Firstly, if a teacher undertakes systematical analysis, he or she can assess the progress of the learner. Secondly, it provides a researcher with evidence of how language is learned or acquired. And thirdly, and in a sense that is the most important aspect, it becomes indispensable to the learner himself or herself, because we can regard the making of errors as a device that learner uses in order to learn. Thank you so much.